Hello and welcome to this Excel tutorial. This tutorial is going to go through some basics that you'll be required to know and work with in order to be able to complete your coursework. For the sake of your coursework, you'll be required to create graphs that match the specifications laid out in this tutorial. This tutorial starts out with some very basic functions such as copying, pasting, inserting, and working with formulas, and then gets a bit more complex, such as the specifications required for creating your graphs and the formulas involved with that. So feel free to skip through and look at the stuff that is most applicable to you, but be sure to specifically follow the instructions required for the graphs. Let's start with the basics. Cutting and pasting is a useful capability to cut down on your time working in Excel. There are two ways to cut and paste. One is by right-clicking, the other is with a keyboard shortcut of Control-C and Control-V. Let's try both now. I right-click and select Copy. Click on another cell and select Paste. And there's different paste options. I can do a regular paste, I can paste the value of that cell, I can paste the formula, transpose, formatting, paste link. So I'm just going to do a regular paste. I can do the same thing with my keyboard, of course, so I'll delete that, and I'll do Control-C and Control-V to paste. Now let's try doing a paste special. Paste special lets us copy and paste just the value of a cell and not the formula. So I'm going to enter a formula here. I clicked the function button to open the functions, and I'm going to use average. Okay. And it automatically selected the average of cells B9 to E9 because those are the cells that have values in them. I just want C9 to E9 though, so I'll change that here and press OK. And that's just informing us that we did not use that number, but that's okay. So if I want to have this number show up somewhere else on the spreadsheet, but I don't want the formula to come with it, I just want the value of 72, I want to use a paste special. So I'll right click and copy and paste, and I'm just going to paste the value. If I wanted the formula, I could do this, and that would change the formula so that it was using the numbers it's relative to, which we'll talk about later. So I'm going to paste the value, and if you look in this cell and the formula bar, you'll see that it just says 72. Compared to this cell, which in the formula bar shows the average parenthesis C9 to E9 parenthesis. Okay, so let's look at how to insert a row or a column. This is good for if you have already filled your worksheet with lots of data and you realize you actually wanted an extra column in between two, or an extra row, or maybe a set of rows. So let's say you wanted an extra column in between B and C. Select C, and on the Home tab, you can see in the Cells group there's an Insert button. Click that, and you'll see a few options. You can insert cells, insert sheet columns, or insert sheet. Since we want to insert a column, we're going to insert sheet columns, and as you can see, there's now an extra column inserted here. And if you want to get rid of that, it's easy to press undo. Now to insert a row, it's the same thing. I'll select 10, and I want the row to go above 10, so I'm going to insert rows, and there we go. I have an extra row now there. So if I wanted to insert multiple rows, I can do that easily as well. Let's highlight 3 rows, and I want to insert 3 above it. I'm going to insert rows, and it's going to insert 3 rows. And like I said, we can undo that easily either by pressing undo or Control Z. And we're back to where we started. When working in Excel, there are a couple of options for using and working with formulas. You can use the formulas menu, or you can manually enter a formula. So let's start by looking at the Formulas tab. This is where you can find any formula that you could ever want to use in Excel. This includes the Auto Sum button, which is where you can access some of the most basic and commonly used formulas in Excel. We can see sum, average, count numbers, max, and min. To enter your own formula, select a cell and begin typing. For example, you saw earlier when I entered the average formula in this cell. I can do the same thing by typing equal average parentheses, and then I'm going to highlight the cells I want to use, C10 to E10, close parentheses, and enter. And as you can see, it looks the exact same as the cell above it, just using the different cell numbers for the different values that I'm working with. Once you've filled in a formula and you know you're going to be using it for the rest of the column, you can easily drag that same formula into the rest of the cells here using Fill Series. This little black box in the bottom corner is how we're going to fill the rest of these cells. I'll put the plus sign here, click and hold, and drag down. And as you can see, it auto-filled those cells with a formula, copying the formula I had in this cell. So this is equal average, C10 to E10. And the one below is equal average, C11 to E11, C12 to E12, and so on. You can also access functions using the Insert Function button. So in this cell, I want to work with standard deviation. So I will click Insert Function. In the Select a Function menu, I'll click Standard Deviation, OK, and then select the cells you want to work with. I don't want to use this range because it's including the average or the mean. I want to use this range. I can do that by highlighting the cells. I could also go into this box and manually edit, and I will click OK. Now that I've entered the formula I want to use in this cell, I don't have to do it over and over and over again here. Like I said before, I can use the Fill Series and drag down. Now if you are using the Fill Series and you realize that you don't want to fill using a formula, perhaps you just wanted to drag that specific number down, you could do that by filling formatting only, or filling without formatting, or copying the cells. Now that we've done these formulas, let's give each of these columns a heading so we know what kind of numbers we're working with. We'll say mean heart rate and standard deviation. Now as you can see, the words in this cell go out farther than the cell is large enough to handle. So if I wanted to make sure that I could see all the words in this cell, there's a couple things I could do. You can do autofit by double clicking on the line in between these two columns, and that will automatically resize the column so that all the words are visible. But if I don't want the column to get any larger, I can do another option on the Home tab and click Wrap Text. And as you can see, that makes all content visible within a cell by displaying it on multiple lines. So I press Wrap Text, and it makes the row larger instead of the column. Now that we've been working with these formulas, let's say you wanted to go back in and edit the formulas later on. You can do that easily by selecting a cell and working in the formula bar. I can backspace and change that to any number I want it to be. I could change it to E12 or E4, anything that you want to alter the formula to be. You can also edit formulas by double-clicking on the cell itself and working in there. An important thing to remember when working with formulas is the order of operations, or you might know it as bed mass. So Excel uses order of operations. When you're inputting complex formulas, you need to make sure you're following the proper order. So the proper order of operations is parentheses, exponents, multiplication and division, addition and subtraction. So in order to get the correct results when entering longer formulas, make sure you're following the correct order. Now let's talk about using absolute cell referencing. Absolute cell referencing is the name of a cell surrounded by dollar signs. Absolute cell referencing is used when you want to ensure your reference stays fixed on a specific cell or group of cells. So let's show you through an example. We're going to enter a formula here using absolute cell referencing. So as you can see, I added this heading, and let's enter the formula. Equal, parentheses, we want this cell, I9, asterisk is multiplication, 1000, and divided by, we want to use the value of John's body weight, which is located in cell C4. And I'm going to close the formula and press enter. And it's calculated the number for us. Now I don't want to enter this formula over and over and over again to fill in the rest of the sheet. So I probably want to drag to ensure that I'm going to not have to type in the formula multiple times. As you can see, when I did that, it didn't work properly. And that's because we weren't using absolute cell referencing. We were using relative cell referencing. So if you look at the formula in the next cell down, it did I10, which is this cell, times 1000 divided by C5 rather than cell C4. And in cell C5 there is no value, so it's giving us an error sign of trying to divide by 0. And if you look at one of the further down ones, you can see that it's referencing cell C9, which does have a number, but it's not the correct number that we want to work with. So we're going to undo that, either by deleting or pressing Ctrl Z, and try again. So this time in this formula, we're going to use absolute cell referencing. So let's add dollar signs. You put the dollar sign in front of the column and in front of the row, saying, I absolutely want to reference column C and absolutely cell row 4. Now let's try filling the formula in the rest of the column. This time the formulas worked correctly because we're using absolute cell referencing. So the relative referencing did change in cell I10. As you can see, I9 in this cell, I10 here, I11, and so on. But they all kept referring to cell C4 because we needed this value for each formula. And we achieved that through absolute cell referencing. Now, if you look at these numbers, you can see they have quite a lot of decimal places, which is unnecessary. So to get rid of some of these decimal places, there's a couple ways we can do that. You can highlight the range, and in the number group of the Home tab, you can see there's two buttons here. One says increase decimal, and one is decrease decimal. In this case, we want to decrease, and you can just keep pressing that until it gets to a point you're happy with. Another way of doing that is through right-clicking and selecting Format Cells. This gives you all the options for formatting cells in one spot. So as you can see, this is categorized as a number cell, and it's telling you that it's using 6 decimal places. And you can decrease that to however many you think is appropriate. So we'll decrease it to 2. And now we have a much more manageable number set to work with. To create a chart, you're going to be going to the Insert tab and selecting the chart type you would like to create. We're going to use a scatter plot. So I click on scatter, and you have a few options. I'm going to select scatter with straight lines and markers. Now you need to select your data. The Select Data button is at the top here in your Chart Tools section. The chart tools appear once you have clicked on your chart. So I click Select Data, and a window appears for me to select my data source. First, I will add. And another window appears asking me to edit my series. You can give your series a name. We'll do mean heart rate. And then you need to select your X and Y values. So first I'll select my X value. I want to use work rate. This chart is going to be comparing work rate versus mean heart rate. So I'm going to select the work rate data by highlighting it. Then I need to select my Y values. So as you can see in the X values, it is updated to explain what it is referencing. So it's sheet 2, that's the sheet we're in, and the absolute cell references of B9 to B16. And now I'm going to edit my Y values. So we'll get rid of that and highlight the mean heart rate data. And as you can see, it's updated the chart to be comparing mean heart rate versus work rate. Now that I've created a chart, I'm going to change some things about it so that it's formatted correctly. For the sake of your work, you don't need to include a legend, so I will delete that. And that resized the chart to fit nicely in my chart area. I want the chart title to go beneath my chart, so I'm going to move it down here and move the chart up. I also want to add axis titles. So to do that, we're going to go into the Layout tab of Chart Tools, the Labels group, and select Axis Titles. Here we have primary horizontal axis title and primary vertical axis title. So I'm going to select title below axis, and you can see that it has appeared. And I'm going to add a vertical axis title as well. Once you've added these titles, you can click into the text box and change the text. So as you can see, I've added titles, mean heart rate for the vertical axis, work rate for the horizontal axis, and mean heart rate versus work rate for the title. Now if I look at the value of the horizontal axis, it's a bit too high considering the values that I'm working with. So I'm going to edit the maximum value on this axis. I do that by selecting the axis and right-clicking and selecting Format Axis. In the box that appears, you can see that all of the options are currently auto. We're going to change it to fixed and edit. So for our fixed maximum, I'm going to lower this to 1800. The fixed minimum is okay, and the major unit and minor unit is okay as well. And I'll click Close. And you can see that the bottom is now updated. And I actually don't like that the major value that it's moving up by is 500, so I'm going to go into Format Axis and edit that as well. Let's change it to 300. And we'll leave that at 100. Another thing you need to make sure you consider when setting up your axis and values on the axis is that the data on the axis needs to be representative of the actual data that you are working with. So since heart rate, which is being measured on the y-axis, can't actually start at 0, we should change the values on the y-axis to start at a more reasonable value. And select Format Axis and change the minimum value to something more reasonable, such as 50. and I will close that. When you create a graph, you need to look at the data on both axes and make sure that the data is not skewed in a way that shows a difference when one does not actually exist. For example, the y-axis should be scaled appropriately to show a good representation of the data you're working with. Once you've correctly formatted the chart, you can save it as a template. So you should review the chart and make sure everything about it is formatted correctly first. And just looking at it, I've noticed that I actually left out a unit measurement for the heart rate. So I'm just going to quickly add that in. We'll do beats per minute. And we've got the measurement rate on this title. We've got the axes set up correctly. So we can go ahead and save it as a template so that you can use it again in the future without having to go through all the formatting steps again. So to do that, we're going to go to the Design tab of Chart Tools and the Type group and click Save as Template. That'll open a window for us to save the template. You can enter a name for the chart and select Save for accessing it later. So I'm going to start working with a different set of data now. And we're going to use a bar chart to compare means and use error bars. So first, let's insert the chart type we're going to use. And then let's select our data. I'm using the means. And as you can see, we have got the axis labels here, and 1 and 2 aren't very descriptive, and so we're going to get the axis titles from here, pre and post, and select OK. And now it's updated the chart area to use that data and those axis labels. So now let's go through the steps to make sure that the graph is properly formatted. Now that we've got it formatted correctly, let's add error bars. So we're going to select the chart area and go into the Layout tab of Chart Tools. We have the Analysis group here, and that's where the error bars button is. We'll select that, and as you can see there are a couple options, but we're going to click More Error Bar Options and show you how to do a custom error bar. So I have the direction selected so that we have both plus and minus shown, and we're going to use a custom value. I'll click the Specify Value button, and as you can see, I've calculated standard deviation. So we're going to be using those values to create our error bars. So I'm going to highlight the data. So I highlighted the values for standard deviation in the positive error value box, and then I also highlighted them in the negative error value box. So I've got the values in both of those filled. I'll select OK, close, and as you can see, the error bars are now part of our graph. Next, let's look at creating a scatter plot with the trend line, the equation of the line, and the r-squared value on the graph. So we're going to go to Insert, Scatter. We're going to use Scatter with only markers. And then we need to select the data. Select Data, and highlight the data you want to use. Now that the graph has been populated with data, we can go ahead and format it correctly. Now that the graph has been properly formatted, we can learn about adding in a trend line, the equation of the line, and the r-squared value. So to add a trend line, you're going to go to the Layout tab in Chart Tools and the Analysis section, and that's where the trend line button is. I'll click Trend Line, and we're going to select a linear trend line, but you have several other options here as well. Now that we've added in a trend line, we can easily add the equation of the line and the r-squared value. To do that, we're going to go back to the Analysis section of the Layout tab and click Trend Line again. This time we're going to select more trend line options. In the Format Trend Line box, near the bottom, you can see two check boxes that you can select. So you're going to select display equation on chart and display r² value on chart. And Excel is going to calculate these for you. So you click close and you can see that they've appeared on our chart area. Once you've completed a chart, you might need to move it into a Word document. There's a few different ways you can do that. So let's move this chart. First, I'm going to copy it and then open my Word document. Here we have several different paste options. We have use destination theme and embed workbook, or keep source formatting and embed workbook. The difference between using the destination theme and keeping source formatting is whether or not you want to use a theme that exists in the Word document that you're transferring the graph to, or you want to keep the source formatting that you were using in the Excel document. We also have the option to link the data or paste as a picture. By embedding a workbook, you're going to make the data editable in the Word document. If you link the data, anything you edit and change in the Excel spreadsheet will be updated in the linked chart in your Word document. And if you paste it as a picture, it becomes uneditable. So any changes you make in Excel will not be updated on the picture graph in your Word document, and any changes you want to make in the Word document will not be doable either. However, if you're completely done with your chart and you know you won't be making any changes, you can paste it as a picture, and that takes up less space and resources in your computer. But if you do make any changes, you'll need to delete the picture and repaste it as a picture later on. So I selected picture, and now this is pasted as a picture, and you can work with it the same way you'd work with any picture in a Word document. So that's the end of this Excel tutorial. Like I said at the beginning, this is just an introduction to the things that you'll need to be using for your coursework. There are certainly many more functions available in Excel, and there are lots of tutorials available online to learn more about those functions.